Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape Podcast. Hosted by Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. The show highlights SER's role supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming.
Welcome back, listeners. As you might be aware, our podcast often showcases the initiatives and projects associated with the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources. We support faculty, staff, and students across the University of Wyoming. And this week, we're exploring the realm of geologic environments and their significance in the energy sector. And joining us today is Professor John Kaszuba. He's a geologist in the John and Jane Wold Centennial Chair of Energy here at the University of Wyoming. He's an SER faculty member, and he shares a passion for educating students. So welcome, Professor Kaszuba.
Thank you, Holly. It's good to be here.
So let's start with sharing a bit about your background and your journey into geology and energy research, and start with what sparked your initial interest in that field.
Well, what sparked my initial interest is when I was a youth, I was actually a teenager, and I made my first trip to the Rocky Mountain West because I grew up in the big city of Chicago. And I had no idea what the world looked like until I came to the Rocky Mountains when I was 16. And that just turned my world upside down. And then after that, into my college days at a small liberal arts college, Beloit College, I hooked up with the geology department there, and one dynamic individual in particular, Hank Woodard, who really motivated me and charged me up for understanding geology and how the earth works. And that I just took off from there.
And so talk about your career path that led you to the University of Wyoming.
Sure. It's been a varied, tortuous, many-chaptered career path.
I think our careers often are.
Well, sometimes people will go in academia to the same place and be there for their entire career. And I started after I got a master's in geology. I was in industry for 7 years, and I worked that, and then left that to do a PhD. And then when I finished that, I went to the national labs where I was at Los Alamos as a research scientist for 11 years, and then I left that to come to the University of Wyoming, and I've been here for 16 years now. So it's been different kinds of projects, different kinds of environments, different kinds of people. And all through it, I think geology and relationships with people kind of were a common theme in all that.
So talk about what specifically do you like about geology?
I like the earth. I like being out. I like knowing how nature works. It's just a thrill. It's just when you're in the mountains and you look at a rock and you know how it got there, and yet you can be on the thrill of a mountain and combine it all. There's just nothing like it.
Okay, well said. Looking back at the early stages of your career, were there any pivotal moments or mentors that shaped your path?
Sure. There was in my college days, Hank Woodard, my geology professor, who really showed me and motivated me what it would mean to be an earth scientist and be a geologist and really embrace everything that entails. And then when I was a postdoc at Los Alamos National Lab, I had a mentor, Dave Janicki, who helped me understand how to take all that energy and drive and passion and turn it into something, channel it into productivity. And I think those two helped me get to where I'm at today.
Great. So, and I'm just curious, we have a ton of geologists here at the School of Energy Resources. Obviously, we work with the geology and geophysics department very closely. Right across what I wouldn't really call it a parking lot. There's hardly any spots, but it's sort of a parking lot is the State Geologic Survey. So we're kind of in a hub, and there's so much passion around this space. And I think you've alluded to why you like it so much. Is Wyoming, is it like a place that people come to do geology? Why is that? Is it just because
it's all here?
It's all here. It's not just empty, but like,
no, it's
what do you mean? It's
here.
Like sticking out of the ground or something?
Well, in some ways, yeah.
Yeah.
So when people go to look at changes in climate history and in the past paleo environments, people from all over the world will come to northern Wyoming, and they'll go to some outcrops near Powell. And you'll walk out of Powell, and drive out of Powell, and within about 10 minutes, you'll get to an outcrop that you can walk up this hill slope, and you'll rapidly encounter what I call geologic ball bearings. There's these large marbles of a mineral that formed in the soils of the ancient environments when the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere had increased and drove the mineralization in the soils. And now it's all exposed and weathering out. So all these marbles are on the hillside, and if you're not careful when you're walking up, you'll come tumbling down.
Okay, good to know. Safety moment. Okay, so I think we'll talk a little bit more about the intersection of geology and energy and your work. But first, I don't want to skip this because I think it's really important. I've been really impressed by the level of dedication you have to your students. And I think it's a really high priority to you. I think it's a high priority for a lot of faculty members, but you really wear it on your sleeve and talk about it very openly about, you don't want to get too many students. You want to make sure that you're able to spend the amount of time with each student that you feel is best for them, that you encourage them to do internships at national labs often, even though it takes them away from their day-to-day work here with you. So can you talk about how you came to put such a high value on helping your students be successful? I mean, it sounds obvious, but I think it's not, and it's worth highlighting.
I'll bring it back to my college days again. I was in a geology department that was small with 3 professors, and they dedicated their time to the students and to the students really understanding and internalizing geology and how it works and the fundamentals and committing to the understanding of processes and the basics. And we would go out to the field. They would take us to the field all the time, in classes, on breaks, in the summertime. And that commitment becomes internal. You just internalize it. And then that was honed for me at Los Alamos when I had postdocs. And Los Alamos National Lab is a great place, and I really enjoyed my time there, but it's a big place with thousands of scientists and projects and money flowing and coming and going and priorities. And sometimes on the national scene, it can trickle down to hardships at the lab that we have to work through. And the vulnerable population there were our postdocs, because they were at will and they were on limited contracts. And if money happened to go away or change or shift, they were vulnerable. And I felt responsible for my postdocs. I did not let I didn't let a shortage of funding or change in funding or whatever get in the way of the postdocs and their careers and their success.
Great. And then you carried that forward here.
And I've carried it forward here.
Well, thank you so much for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Proud to have you as a faculty member. And that is one of the big criteria for the John and Jane Wold Centennial Chair in Energy, is that focusing on someone who teaches a full load and really shows genuine interest in their students and their success. So congratulations on being the holder for that.
Thank you.
Okay, one more thing on this topic around students. So this endowed chair you hold, you've won a stewardship award for that, which I don't think you're definitely not someone who was trying to win any awards, but I think part of it was because you do a conference with the Wold family. Also, though, you take the students to present to the Wolds, and I've attended a couple of those. I think it's very interesting because when you're out of school, sometimes you have like these bigger picture questions. And so they'll ask the students questions that really make them kind of lift their head up and think bigger than their project that they're working on for their research. So can you just talk about the value of that interaction, and for you and for the Wolds and for your students, and why you put that effort into doing that?
The students need to know and internalize that they're part of a broader community. It's more than just the campus environment. It's even more than the university. It's more than the town of Laramie. In many respects, it's more than the state of Wyoming. They're citizens of the world, and they need to understand their place in it. And you can't do that if you sit at home and think good thoughts. You have to get out and you have to talk to people and you have to understand where they're coming from and what the problems are and what their successes and failures and expectations are. And the students are going to be better citizens, better scientists, better geologists, and frankly, the research is going to be better, and their experience at Wyoming is going to be better on account of that. So we go twice a year now to visit the Wold Foundation. We've evolved to where we do it once in the fall in Denver and once in the spring in April in Casper. And this time around this spring, I've actually got a large contingent that is going. We have 6 graduate students, 1 undergraduate, 1 technician who works in the analytical lab in the Department of Geology, me, and another faculty member. So there's 10 of us that are going to go and visit the Wolds, and 2 of the students are going to present a summary of what they're doing and why it's important. And then they get feedback. The Wolds in the room, and then who zoom in from Denver, ask questions about the significance of their work, or, hey, did you see the story about the such and such mine or well or field or event that happened in Texas or Wyoming or wherever in the world, and how does that fit with what you're doing and how you're thinking? And have you ever thought about how what you do applies to this water resource or this energy resource? And it gets the students to thinking, and it also helps the Wold Foundation and the Wold companies to see that their investment is in a positive future. It's a worthwhile investment that's going to pay dividends that you can't put a number on today, but you know that it's going to pay back dividends in the future.
Absolutely. So what are your thoughts on the energy landscape and the type of careers that would be available to your students when they graduate in the future?
Well, that's a good question, Holly, because in one sense, it's the traditional sorts of things, the energy companies, the mining companies, the environmental companies. But at the same time, it's we don't know, because in some respects, we don't know what the problems of the future are, or we have the problems, we're just not aware of them yet. And in order to be able to solve those problems, whether they're in energy or environment or other resources, and usually the nexus of all those, the students have to do the basics. They have to learn the basics and how things work and why they work. And then my students also, there's a duality to everything we do, and that's a legacy from my national lab days where we study the fundamentals and then we take a step back and say, okay, this is how the fundamentals can help this applied problem or that societal problem. And those kinds of careers that they're able to do that for just haven't happened yet. We don't know 10, 20, 30 years from now what those careers are going to look like on top of the more traditional ones we have today.
And so your work today, it spans a really wide range of topics within geology and energy. So could you give us an overview of your primary research areas? Let's get a little more specific on that.
Sure. Well, in a general way, before the specifics,
okay.
We worry about how water and how rocks behave when they're together. We see at the Earth's surface, you can see if you leave your bicycle out, it's going to rust. Well, water has effects with rocks underneath our feet, and that's what we study. And so we worry about how elements move around, in particular metals, critical minerals, some of which are important to modern society, to our technology, everything from our cell phones to advanced energy technologies. And in doing so, responsible harvesting of those metals and of those energy-related products so that we can maintain and preserve our environment. So we look at conventional deposits of critical minerals like Bear Lodge that we have in the northeastern part of the state. And I have a student who's starting to worry about that. And then we worry about, well, are there other ways of finding critical minerals that we haven't thought about yet? Are there critical minerals in oil? Are there critical minerals in coal? Are there critical minerals in the rocks that are associated with coals? If so, where, how much? And if not, why not? And if why? And how it moves and how you might be able to get it out. But for the engineers and the processing people to be able to get that out, they have to know the where, the what, and the why.
I love that, because you've had to explain this to me before, right? Because engineers kind of start down the line a bit in like, if you think of like not a timeline, but a line in terms of producing a mineral, I think of like, okay, we have the mineral, but we don't have the mineral.
That's right.
Actually. And so I think that's a really interesting point, that like understanding, why is it important to understand like how the mineral got there, like how it's attached to the rock? Like, why would an engineer care if they're trying to separate it and use it for something?
Well, so for example, one of the biggest rare earth element deposits is in China, and those elements are literally stuck to mineral particles, to clay minerals in the soil. And so it's in some ways a simple, almost benign chemical wash to get those elements out. Whereas critical minerals, rare earth elements in particular, like certain minerals that are pretty robust, that you would need harsh chemicals and temperatures and multiple treatments over time to be able to get those rare earth elements out. And that costs money, and that has potential health and environmental risks that you have to spend more money to help prevent. And so whether it's stuck in a mineral that's recalcitrant, or sticking to a mineral where you just merely wash it off, or something in between, you need to know that. And you need to know that so you can move forward with harvesting it. Mm-hmm. Or I also have a student looking at critical minerals in oil in the Bighorn Basin. So she's looked at vanadium and rare earth elements, as well as some of the other minerals elements that can be in oil, such as uranium. And she actually went up to the Bighorn Basin, and we worked with operators that we were introduced to by alums and by folks here at SCR. And we were able to get to the well pad and sample the oil and sample the water and take it back to the lab and figure out how to analyze it, which is no easy feat.
Right.
It took Ellen 6 months to perfect the method. And
Ellen's your student.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you can read all you want. You can pick up a journal, paper, or a book, and it says, do this. But the descriptions are never complete enough, and they're always missing steps. It took poor Ellen 6 months to figure out how to get a proper rare earth element analysis of an oil.
Wow.
And there were several messes in the hoods in the meantime, where water in the oil kind of expanded and poof, oil everywhere.
But then that's a major contribution she made.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that you all made. So, okay, and let's just make sure we define, like, what do you mean by critical minerals?
Critical minerals, there's a list of elements.
It's a political list, right? Like
the USGS.
Or it's decided by the government, I should say.
The U.S. Geological Survey was tasked a few years ago, roughly 2018, I believe, with determining the elements that are needed for modern society, for energy, and in particular for national security needs that are susceptible to supply chain disruptions, be it because there's only one place in the world to get it, or because you can get it in multiple places, but there's only a few places that process it, and none of those places are in the U.S. So the U.S. Geological Survey put that list together. A little while later, the Department of Energy added to the list with elements that are important to energy production, traditional and new. And people are looking around in traditional places, ore deposits, for example, places where they're concentrated naturally, and they're looking around in places like oil or produced water or coal byproducts to see, well, maybe are they concentrated there, or even dispersed? And if they're dispersed, can you do some kind of economic analysis where if you produce enough oil in the right way and you can remove the metals, then you're co-producing a commodity with energy. You're reducing the economic cost of doing it all. You're reducing the environmental footprint for it. And it's just win-win all the way around.
Great. And rare earths they're like a class within critical minerals. Yeah.
That's right. There's about 10 of them that have similar chemical properties that you can find in minerals that we need for everything from advanced electronics to modern automobiles and, military needs as well.
So I think you've already touched on this, but I want to see if there's anything you want to add. Wyoming is a state rich in energy resources and mineral resources, both traditional and emerging. So is there anything that you'd like to emphasize that might be the most pressing energy or extractive related geologic challenges in Wyoming, and how does your work address those?
That's a great question, Holly, and that's something that my students and I discuss all the time, because those are the kinds of questions that you really want to tackle when you're doing research, because you have to apply some fundamental science to figuring it out, and along the way you can make a contribution, at least a fundamental understanding, which down the road might be productive. So, for example, the traditional oil and gas fields in Wyoming are doing just fine, but the non-traditional ones, where you still want to be able to get the petroleum from to fuel modern society, those are getting harder and harder to extract in an environmentally responsible way. So we look at how man's effort to extract those oil and gas products from what are known as unconventional petroleum systems, how our efforts to do that might actually make the rock better for removing those oil and gas products, or make it worse and actually make a problem where you can't get those materials out. And so we take a look at, are you improving the rock's ability to release its oil and gas, or are you inhibiting it and making it harder to get out just by the virtue of you trying to get it out?
So, if you could do it for the layperson, give an example of each of those. What could you do to the rock to make it more difficult to get oil out, and what could you do to make it easier?
That's a great question, Holly. The process of producing oil and gas means you have to move all kinds of water around. You have to add water with chemicals in it to get that oil moving, and then you have to remove water to have the oil come out with it. And if you add the wrong chemicals, or if you add things in the wrong sequence, you can actually make a new mineral where there wasn't one, and that will fill the void space where the oil flowed, and therefore you're going to stop the flow. On the other hand, if you can develop a way to have that water moving that you're pushing through it actually make the void spaces larger so the oil flows freer, or at least stop those void spaces from filling up with new minerals, then you can maintain or even enhance the productivity. And along the way, if you can understand how the minerals in the rock might release the metals that they have entrained in them that come out with the water and the oil, then all of a sudden you have a chance of co-producing a commodity with your energy product. So if you could get vanadium, or you can get chromium, or you can get even uranium out with the oil and the water that's associated with it, then all of a sudden you have a shot at producing an important commodity that we need for modern society without having to go dig a mine somewhere and be able to extract the rock and get it out.
So one of my favorite questions I love to ask faculty and researchers is about the research process and how there's always something surprising. So I'm curious, have you had anything in your research at any point in your career that you found really surprising, something where you started the research program and it took a different direction, or the results were really different than what you kind of expected when you started the work? Do you have any examples of those?
I have examples galore of things that that took a left-hand turn that were big surprises, and I have examples of things that I never thought would work. We had an idea, and I thought, oh, that'll never work, and it did.
Like what?
So my first graduate student, who actually is a resident came to us from Thermopolis, Wyoming, and now lives in Kirby, Wyoming, and works for Wyoming Whiskey. We were looking at the CO2 fields in southwest Wyoming, down there on Riley Ridge, the Moxa Arch. And the rocks there are fairly interesting, and they have a certain pattern of minerals to them that you don't find everywhere. And so we hypothesized that natural mineral pattern was due to the natural accumulation of CO2 on Riley Ridge. But those things never work. You predict it, and it's never going to happen. And we went to the lab, and we duplicated the pressure, temperature, water, rock that you see in the subsurface in Riley Ridge. And when you open things up at the end of your experiment, lo and behold, we had what was in the rock. So it was like, ta-da, we're good. This is great. That worked out just well. On the other hand of things, we were looking at some clay minerals, some clay-rich rocks that are associated with coals in the Powder River Basin. And we thought that we knew there was some amount of rare earth elements associated with those rocks that are by the coal. And so we thought the rare earth elements would be stuck to clay minerals the same way they are in the big deposit in China. And when my student tore into it, lo and behold, there's no rare earth elements stuck to those clays. It's all inside of the minerals, either the possibly minerals eroded down and deposited from barrelage, possibly. That's an idea we have yet to test. Or some other process that we just aren't aware of yet. So what we thought might be easily extractable rare earth elements turned out to be no such thing.
Very interesting. So you recently spent a sabbatical in Scotland.
I did.
So that's really cool.
Yes, it was.
Can you talk about how that experience influences your perspective on energy research and geology?
Sure.
And why Scotland?
Why Scotland?
Yeah, why Scotland?
That's a great question. I've traveled extensively over Europe and have quite a few collaborators in Europe, across the U.S., of course, but also in Europe. And when you get to talking to folks and talking about common interests and what you're doing, it evolved that Scotland would be a wonderful place to sit and learn what they do and how I could fit into it. And then in 2019, I went to a conference, an AAPG conference in Edinburgh. It was a look at unconventional resources in the energy transition. And in doing so, I was able to learn a little bit about Edinburgh and visit some of the campuses at the University of Edinburgh and Heriot-Watt University, and I really liked what I saw. And at Heriot-Watt, they also have the BGS, the British Geological Survey, co-located on campus. So you had the British Geological Survey, and you had all these scientists and geologists working on energy-related problems, and everything being together was this dynamic, exciting place to hang out at. And so we got to talking, and one thing led to another, and 4 years later, there I was for half a year on a sabbatical.
Do you want to talk about, are there any specific projects that you engaged in during your sabbatical that are worth highlighting?
The biggest is the lithium work. Lithium is one of those critical minerals that's important for battery technologies. And lithium is an interesting element. You can find it in high desert basins in South America, and these high intermontane basins where you've got a lot of salts that have dried up, and lithium is concentrated in the pores. And you can find lithium in certain hard rock deposits where it's in a particular mineral that you have to crush and dissolve with very exotic chemicals to get out. But in the southwest of England, there is a collection of granitic rocks through which hot waters, hydrothermal waters flow that are rich in things like lithium and tin. And so my collaborators are what are known as geomechanics people. They worry about what happens when you bash, crash, crush, and just do damage to a poor little rock. And I worry about how water affects that poor little rock. And so together it was a match made in heaven. They've got some industry partners worried about, okay, if we can produce the geothermal energy and there's lithium in that water, we can get that lithium out. And again, you're co-producing energy with an important product for modern society. But where's the lithium coming from, and why is it in so much quantities, and what happens if we start pumping on it and producing it? Is it going to last for some reasonable amount of industry time to make it worth the investment, or will it dry up and dry up quickly? So I'm working with the geomechanics people right now, and with people in my department. We're trying to combine what we do with geochemistry with what they do with crashing on rocks to understand the lithium in that geothermal system in the south of England.
And is there any translation to, I know we have lithium in produced water here, or at least we're looking at it here in Wyoming. Is there any translation here?
We're looking at it, and the translation is understanding where the lithium, what minerals the lithium is in, and why it's leaving that mineral and moving into the water. The environments are completely different, and I've actually looked at lithium in some rocks in the Powder River Basin. We're always looking at sort of byproducts of what happens when man tries to produce oil and gas. When they do that, again, I've mentioned this several times already, but metals come out. And one of the metals that was coming out when we were looking at these exotic chemicals interacting with rocks was lithium. We were getting lithium in the water, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense as to where it was coming from. So we did further work on those rocks, and we had to crush them and analyze them and do more mineralogy work and more geochemistry work. And we've got lithium in different minerals in Wyoming in the Powder River Basin than they do in the south of England. And we've got colder waters in the Powder River Basin than they do in the south of England. And so in some ways that the combination of those different characteristics have made it possible for lithium to be plentiful in the waters in the south of England and not so much in the northeast of Wyoming.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So looking ahead, are there any particularly exciting developments or research areas that you see on the horizon for energy and geology in Wyoming?
Oh, sure. I keep coming back to the critical minerals aspect.
Yeah.
Geologists love critical minerals. And that's because...
Why is that?
Well, it's because it harkens back to your youth. Uh-huh. When you take an intro geology course, you get to see these beautiful rocks, and you go to the field and you see these rocks and you're like, oh, these beautiful colors, and oh, these people who are your role models thrill to them. And so it's like, wow, that's got to be thrilling. And you learn to thrill to it too. And geologists, just the child geologist in you just never lets go of that. And so having critical minerals and knowing what the minerals are and these beautiful natural objects, which also provide for humanity as well, is just this lure that's impossible to resist.
And your passion's coming out. So, okay, for our last question, we always like to switch gears. So this one's a little different, not even about geology, but you can totally tie it back to geology. So for our last question, I just want to ask, what's your favorite place to visit in Wyoming?
Well, that's a great question, Holly, because I don't have one favorite place. I have favorite places depending on my mood and interests. Okay. So in the winter, when I'm in need of solitude, I'll go up into the Laramie Range and I'll snowshoe or ski up in there. And if you get up there early enough and far enough away from the trailheads, you won't see anybody. Yeah. And you've got that Wyoming blue sky, and you've got that snow around you, and you've got the spruce trees, and life is just glorious. And in the summer, same kind of thing. When I want to be out and about and just away from humanity, if you will, I'll go up to the snowies and I'll get away from the trailhead, and you just won't see anybody for hours. And if you go to the right places, you won't see anybody all day, and it's just peaceful. And I really do like that. When I get out with my family, we like to go to places all over the state, actually. We like to go to central Wyoming, a place called the Granite Mountains. And it's like heaven on earth. It's this classic Wyoming beauty of these naked mountains just surrounding these intermontane valleys that are full of sagebrush and cowboy country, and the sunsets are just spectacular and something to behold.
Yeah, they sure are. Okay, well, that brings us to the end. So I just want to thank you for all you do for us here at the School of Energy Resources, for your students, for the University of Wyoming more broadly, for the state of Wyoming, and thanks for doing the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Holly.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every other Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.